He only meant to help a struggling veteran, a broken truck, a free repair done out of simple human decency. But by the end of the day, that act of kindness would cost him everything. A single father already fighting to keep food on the table, already carrying the weight of being judged before he even speaks. One accusation, one phone call, one decision made behind closed doors. And suddenly he wasn't an employee anymore, he was an example. But what no one realized was that someone powerful was watching, and the truth was about to shake the entire company. Before that day, his life was built on routine and resilience. Every morning started before sunrise. He would pack his son's lunch, double-check homework, and leave a quiet note of encouragement on the kitchen counter. Being a single father wasn't the life he planned, but it was the one he embraced with everything he had. At work, he kept his head down and his standards high. Cars came in broken and left running smoother than ever. Customers trusted his hands, even if some coworkers never quite trusted his presence. He had learned to ignore the sideways glances, the subtle jokes that weren't really jokes, the way management watched him just a little closer than everyone else. He told himself it was just part of the job: work hard, stay grateful, don't make waves. Money was tight, but pride kept him steady. He believed that if he showed up early, stayed late, and treated people right, things would eventually get better. His son believed it too. So when he saw the elderly veteran stranded with a smoking engine in the parking lot, helping didn't feel like a decision. It felt natural, a quick repair, no charge. Just respect for someone who had already given enough. He didn't know that someone inside the building was watching from the office window. He didn't know that generosity in the wrong hands could be twisted into something else. The call into the office came just before closing. At first, it didn't feel unusual. Management called employees in all the time, but the atmosphere shifted the moment he stepped inside. The door closed softly behind him. The air felt heavier. No small talk. No usual nod of respect for another long day's work. Instead, there were tight expressions, folded arms, a printed complaint sitting on the desk like evidence in a trial. He was told a customer had reported him, not for bad service, not for damaging a vehicle, for unauthorized work, for violating company policy, for giving away services without approval. The words came cold and rehearsed. He tried to explain the situation calmly, the veteran, the minor fix, the fact that it took less than 15 minutes. It wasn't about money. It was about doing the right thing, but the more he explained, the less anyone seemed to hear him. The complaint, he learned, hadn't come from the veteran. It came from another customer who had been waiting, a man who claimed it was unprofessional, a man who implied favoritism, a man who questioned why rules were being bent, and then the tone shifted. The questions stopped being about policy and started feeling personal. Why had he stepped outside without permission? Why hadn't he cleared it first? Why did he think he could make that decision on his own? The same managers who had once praised his efficiency were now dissecting his judgment. Every answer he gave felt like it dug him deeper. Every attempt to defend himself sounded to them like defiance. Within minutes, the verdict was delivered, effective immediately, just like that. No warning, no suspension, no second chance. His badge was taken, his locker cleared under supervision. Coworkers avoided eye contact as he walked through the garage one last time. Some looked uncomfortable. Others looked relieved it wasn't them. Outside, the late afternoon sun felt harsh against his skin. He sat in his car, staring at the steering wheel, trying to process how 15 minutes of kindness had turned into unemployment. But the worst part wasn't the job. It was the realization creeping in beneath the surface. He had seen others bend policy before: free diagnostics for friends, discounts approved with a wink. Repairs quietly comped for the right customers, no investigations, no terminations, yet somehow when he stepped outside protocol, it became a firing offense. By the time he pulled into his driveway, the weight of it settled heavily in his chest. His son ran to the door, smiling, unaware that everything had just changed. Inside the company, however, something else was unfolding. The man who filed the complaint wasn't just another waiting customer, and the veteran he had helped wasn't as powerless as he seemed. Emails were already circulating. Questions were being asked at a level far above the garage floor. The next morning, the shop floor was unusually quiet. Managers who had moved so confidently the day before now stood stiff, pale, and visibly shaken. An emergency meeting had been called before opening. Corporate was on the line. Not regional management, corporate. The complaint that triggered the firing had reached someone it was never meant to reach. The stranded veteran he helped wasn't just a random customer. He was the older brother of the company's CEO. And he had sent a detailed account of what really happened, how a mechanic stepped in without hesitation, refused payment, and treated him with dignity when others walked past. He also described what he witnessed afterward: the cold stares, the sudden hostility, the speed of the termination. Security footage was pulled, emails were reviewed. Patterns began to surface: who was disciplined, who was excused, who was given grace, and who was not. By noon, the same office that fired him was being investigated. At home, he sat at the kitchen table, staring at bills he wasn't sure he could pay, unaware that his name was now being spoken in boardrooms. His integrity was being defended in rooms he had never stepped foot in. The narrative that painted him as reckless was collapsing under evidence. Then the call came, not from his manager, not from HR. From the very top, in a single moment, the weight of humiliation, anger, and doubt collided with something unexpected: validation. The truth had surfaced. The injustice had been exposed. But the damage, the sleepless night, the fear in his son's eyes when he sensed something was wrong, those couldn't be erased. The company now faced a choice: correct the mistake quietly, or confront what it revealed about how power had been used all along. By the end of the week, the decision was reversed. His job was reinstated, publicly. The managers who rushed to terminate him were placed under review, and new policies were announced about fairness, oversight, and accountability. On paper, it looked like justice had been served. He returned to the shop floor days later, not with triumph, but with quiet dignity. Some coworkers offered awkward nods, others avoided him entirely. The air felt different now, careful, watched. Corrected, but what lingered wasn't victory. It was the memory of how quickly everything had been taken away. One complaint, one assumption. One decision made without giving him the benefit of the doubt. If the veteran hadn't spoken up, if the CEO hadn't listened, if the evidence hadn't existed, what would have happened? He would have been another hardworking man labeled unprofessional, another father scrambling to explain to his child why doing the right thing cost them stability. That's the part that stays with him. Justice arrived, but only because power intervened, and that raises a harder truth. How many others never get that call from the top? How many acts of quiet discrimination go unchallenged because no one influential is watching? How many talented, honest people are forced to carry the weight of assumptions simply because of who they are? He still fixes cars. He still wakes up before sunrise to pack lunches and leave notes of encouragement. But now he understands something deeper. Integrity doesn't always protect you from injustice. Sometimes it exposes it. This wasn't just a story about a job. It was a reminder that fairness shouldn't depend on connections. Because the real question is, how many stories like this never make it to the boardroom?